on the left-hand side of this panel, I would like to start by introducing Sadiqa Begum, who is 17. She's a student at Mulberry School, who, as you know, has been our partners for a while, really since the very beginning. She's been a year representative in the school councils, participated in 3 conferences as part of the school's flagship Model United Nations programme. She's worked as an outreach ambassador for UCL, and she's taking part in an architecture mentoring scheme because she's going to be an architect. Next to her is Baroness Lawrence of Clarendon, OBE, Doreen Lawrence, a household name, an international name, in fact, catapulted into that place actually because of the death of her son, Stephen, and since then she has really become a campaigner for justice around his death in particular, but justice in many other ways too, in parallel circumstances, for which we are very grateful. Doreen Lawrence. Then we have Shami Chakrabarti, pin-up girl for human rights. And I think that's pretty fair. I'm prepared to say that she often says that she's in love with me. I'm going to say that actually this is me outing myself now. I'm in love with her too. Please don't tweet that. That will be misinterpreted. But what I would say is that she's in the papers today, in the Telegraph, as one of the top 100 influential people. Here she is. There's a picture of her there. And I think she's in another article as well. So
that's why I get a cup of coffee. Right.
Oh yeah,
that's very influential. I did that just as
she's been the Director of Liberty since 2003. She's a barrister by background. She's Chancellor of Oxford Brookes University, Honorary Professor of Law at the University of Manchester, Visiting Fellow of Nuffield College, Oxford, and a Master of the Bench of Middle Temple. That's enough. Okay. She's also on the WOW Advisory Board. That's the most important thing to say. And then finally, but not least, Natascha McElhone, who is an actor and a writer. She's currently about to star in Trevor Nunn's production of Fatal Attraction at the Theatre Royal Haymarket. Exactly.
Ooh, did you hear that?
Whoa, yes. A brave woman in all kinds of ways. And she's been in many plays and films. You'll know her from co-starring with George Clooney in the futuristic love story Solaris, the TV series The Company, which was a Golden Globe-nominated drama. She also has starred in the children's fantasy film The Secret of Moonacre Manor, which shared the title role of Mrs. Dalloway with Vanessa Redgrave. She's got lots of film and television and theatre credits. And it's amazing that she made time for us this morning because she's literally in the middle of teching, which means that you don't sleep or do anything at all. And yet here she is Sunday morning, and she's doing the papers. So thank you, Natascha. Okay, so we didn't know when we invited Doreen that the papers would be full of the next revelations around the particular Stephen Lawrence case. But if you wouldn't mind, Doreen, inevitably, I'd like to start with you and what you've picked out of the papers that revolves around your own case.
Okay, in the Observer, but then I presume it's in all the papers around the undercover policing, and the link between the Stephen Lawrence case and the Daniel Morgan around the undercover. And it just seems, I think for years, you know, we've suspected that there is something, but never been able to. And so what came out on Thursday, and in fact repeated here on the Sunday paper, is what Mark Ellison, QC, when he did his review. And so which is quite shocking, because it wasn't just about my family, it's about other activists over the years, and where you have undercover police who are fathers' children, have relationships with women. And so it's sort of looking at that and how the system, well, the police service really, that they're able to do all of this for so long, and it's only now it's coming out. It's been just coming out in dribs and drabs, and so to have it, you know, in black and white now, so where all these women are saying this has been happening to us for years, and now here we are in black and white, and it's in all the Sunday papers. I'm starting from Thursday anyway. Yeah.
Shami, can you just talk about the implications of the Met, but presumably other police forces as well, having license to basically go into any activist context.
Absolutely.
And lead a double life.
Well, thank you, Jude. Jude, who makes the sun shine on the Southbank, and Doreen, who has been battling to shine a bit of light on this murky, murky world of corrupt and racist and sexist policing for over 20 years. Here's the odd thing about privacy protection in this country. If a police officer wants to search your home, ordinarily they have to go to a magistrate and get a warrant to demonstrate that it's necessary and proportionate to search your home for whatever you've got there, drugs, explosives, stolen property and so on. Unless it's an emergency, they need a warrant. If the police want to tap your telephone because they think you're conspiring to commit a crime or whatever, then you don't have to go to a judge, you go to the Home Secretary, which we at Liberty don't think is such a good protection. We think politicians aren't really suited to this. It's better to be a judge. But get this, if they actually want to put someone in your home or in your family or amongst your friendship circle or in your campaigning organisation, they get to authorise themselves. Now, if you think about the intrusions that I've been describing, I think most of us would agree to actually put a human being in your trust and in your life is by far the most intrusive, and that has the least protection for all of us. And as Doreen pointed out, she doesn't just campaign for herself and her family and for race equality. She is a legendary human rights campaigner, and there are women in the environmental movement in particular who spent years with men who they thought were their partners and their lovers and their friends, who turned out to be undercover cops who were abusing that power. And Doreen's put her name to an amendment to legislation to require judicial sign-off before that kind of activity can happen.
Okay, so this is an interesting and an important thing, which is judicial sign-off. And because I want to ask a question myself on this. We are told that supposing there is a terrorist organization, I mean, the word terrorist gets applied in all different contexts, depending on the political circumstances. But let's just say for a minute we agree on the notion of terrorism, and then, the idea of going undercover inside terrorist organizations. In some circumstances, it would be argued that that's legitimate in order to save lives. So are you saying that there might be a degree of legitimacy about undercover work, but the critical thing is it must be judicially agreed that it is critical and that this undercover work must be known about as a matter of justice? Is that the point?
I would make 2 points. I don't think they should ever be sleeping with people on the job. That's proposition number one, with or without sign-off. I just do not think that can be justified. It's such a violation of the suspect's rights. That would be my first point. But yes, you're right, Jude. I do think that undercover policing has its place, and sometimes you would seek to infiltrate a criminal conspiracy, but it's such a potential intrusion, and it's so open to abuse of power that there must be judicial supervision. A judge should sign the warrant in the first place, and it shouldn't be able to go on for years. These men were doing this for years, living completely double lives, and that shouldn't be possible. Judges should have to keep supervising this intrusion.
And Doreen, in terms of your own life and your own circle, can you just tell us the implication of this level of undercover vigilance into your life and into your circle? What's it done to you?
Well, I think so when I found out, it was only a few months ago that I found out what happened to my family.
Could you just explain what happened?
There was something on the news that said that undercover police has been investigating the family, looking to sort of dredge up dirt because they felt that the family was, I presume, asking too many questions of the police. So the police themselves put undercover police in, but at the time they were still denying that they were doing that, and they were saying that it's nothing. So when I heard that, and I thought, who's been in my house? At the time when you're grieving, who's been in my house? Who's been that close to us? And why would you want to do that to a family when you have a position of power? You're supposed to investigate a murder, and that's all I wanted them to do. And that was always been my campaign, is to say, what happened to Stephen on the night, and why didn't you do something? And then when you hear that this has been going on for so long, and then later on reading also that this undercover police has been going since in the late 60s and using dead children's name. So it's, you know, it has so far-reaching implication of what the police has been up to for so long. I mean, so my children, were they following my children as well? So there's all those questions that, you know, I want answers to. And so I am really pleased that the Home Secretary have decided now about the public inquiry, because I had my doubts to start off with. But the fact that she was so disgusted of what's been going on, what happened to us, that for her to have a public inquiry. But I said, not just around my family now, it's around all the things that's been happening for so long. And I think all of us should really welcome that.
Right. Okay, so this is the, thank you. So this is really across most of the papers today. So you know, it's probably #1 headline news. And I just want to say a double thank you, because I said to Doreen this morning, the number of people who must have asked you to come and do the papers this morning or be on radio or television for interviews because of this huge coup, you know, and here she is at WOW. So really, thank you. Okay, Natascha, let me move to another picture. You chose something from the Sunday Times, which I think is a Sunday Times exclusive. Could you just explain what that is?
Yeah, it's the story on the front cover of the Sunday Times, which is Set Us Free, Plead Saudi Princesses, and then it's further developed in the news review section. And it's the story of, well, the king of Abdullah of Saudi Arabia. It's 2 of his daughters. He's got 36 children, I think, from, is it 5 different wives? But it's just to sort of illustrate this notion that I remember there was a story last year about a Yemeni girl who was 8 who died of internal bleeding on her wedding night to a 40-year-old man. It was an arranged marriage. And the notion that when the parents were interviewed as to why they had married their daughter off, it was a financial issue. They could no longer afford to look after her. And they felt that, you know, the mother of this child, the same thing had happened to her. And it was just this sort of slightly self-policing kind of idea of a patriarchal system where no one questions it. There are a set of assumptions that are made and that are adhered to, and women are never, they're not educated, so they don't even have the notion that there might be another possible way of living. But I read a brilliant article by a woman who had also been subjected to this and had managed to escape, and she was now living in this country. But it just brought to my mind that this isn't an economic issue. It exists throughout the whole pyramid of privilege, right down to people who, you know, living on garbage dumps in India. That what predominates and what's defended is this idea that men control everything, that women are commodities, that women can be bought and sold, can be used and abused, and when their fertility is at an end, in the case of, you know, this mother of these princesses, she's pushed to one side and another woman replaces her, and then the man goes on and has more children. Then when that woman comes to the end of her fertility, she's pushed to one side and another one. And this to me is insanity, and yet it's defended because it's somewhere else. It's happening somewhere else. It's not happening here. In fact, it is happening here in this country to all sorts of families who live here under this, like I said, this self-policing sort of honor system where you can't interfere, and our police force can't interfere because they don't understand this cultural difference. And so there's an awful lot being done in the name of religion and culture that's actually a human rights abuse. And it happens to be women who are constantly abused. So therefore it's not deemed to be as important. And that still persists. I hear about this all the time from my friends who live in these families. A girlfriend of mine who is Pakistani, and her father threatened to kill her if she didn't marry the man that they wanted her to marry. She's been educated in England. English is her first language. She's got a degree. She's out clubbing with her friends and so forth, bringing shame to the family. She tells me her and her friends, they all live like this. They have to leave their families and be, you know, discredited and dishonored in order to have any say.
These two princesses, I say you read about it in the Sunday Times, it's an exclusive. These 2 princesses are actually educated, but because they haven't got the protection, they've been put under the protection of their half-brother, who polices them. They can't leave the villa, and they haven't been able to leave the villa for years and years.
Yeah.
And I suppose really what you're saying, and quite rightly, is that the country allows that to happen because he is a ruler, and other people take as a given the fact that it's a pity, but a sort of inevitability that this idea of girls and women being able to be policed is just culturally specific and allowed to carry on happening. So it's not something which the government are going to make a huge fuss about. I mean, our government are not going to make a huge fuss about it.
No, because I think there's a fear too of being accused of racism or some kind of misunderstanding about a cultural difference, or, you know, criticizing another religion. And I think, you know, we have to strip that back, and where there are abuses and where young girls are being raped by family members and that's being allowed to stay in the family, and the girls are too fearful to go to the authorities and report this because they'll be dishonored and they'll be rejected from their family. You know, this sort of thing has to be outed and spoken about. And I mean, there was this also made me think about Saudi Arabia, a woman called Manal al-Sharif, who last year gave a fantastic talk and was very, very brave. All she was after was the right to drive unaccompanied in Saudi Arabia, because that would change her life and her sisters and her female friends. I.e., if you don't have a husband, or indeed if you're a widow, you can't go anywhere. You're not allowed to travel anywhere unless you have a male relative to protect you and accompany you. So, and if you don't have a full brother, as Jude said, well, then you're screwed, really.
So, Sadiqa, you've looked at global politics quite considerably in your work. This idea of people sort of saying, well, it's cultural, therefore it's allowed. What do you feel about the way that people approach human rights for women in cultures where they have stated very clearly that a woman is under the rule of the brother or the husband?
I think I obviously don't agree, and I obviously find it completely wrong. And I also think it's insane how our government is threatened, feels threatened, or feels scared to enter or intervene because they feel they'd be criticized about how they're reacting to a cultural issue. And I think that shouldn't be the case. I think we should definitely react, and I think we should definitely intervene. I mean, it's a violation of human rights, and that should always be something that we strive to fix. Whatever cultural differences there are, whatever obstacles there are in the way of doing that, and whatever criticism we might face, human rights is always going to be a priority of ours as human beings, and I think we should strive to get that for everyone. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I just check that we can hear? Yeah, you can. Good. I mean, I think that because I think we're blessed in the UK to live in a society where there is a massive range of cultures, I think we need to call on voices from right across all those cultures to come out and speak about this, because actually this issue of relative rights, it causes lots of discomfort, anxiety. People are not confident about what they should or shouldn't feel, you know, and actually to have, simply to have somebody speaking out about female genital mutilation, for example, from the culture from which it is coming, and saying, no, this is not cultural, this is just wrong, it gives everybody permission. Now, you would think that intelligently we could just give ourselves permission anyway, but it's been a very clouded debate for a very long time.
I think being in the position that we are in this country, we become numb, and you know, the detachment that we have from these issues creates a numbness towards them. We feel the initial shock, and then we feel a sort of lack of priority when it comes to actually intervening and taking action. And so when we hear about, you know, girls and women speaking up about the issues from their own experiences or from their own cultures, it's empowering and it's impactful, because we see the issue and we see it being fought from their own standpoint. For example, on Friday I went to watch Nirbhaya, and the whole play was about breaking silence against a key issue, and how, you know, the playwright said something about how an issue that big creates a wound, and if we do not act straight away, people, you know, they desensitize, the wounds heal again, and we no longer feel the initial shock and the pain, and so we need to act straight away. And I feel like it's really true. When we hear about these sort of stories, we get the wound, we get the pain, we get the initial shock, and then it heals, and we become desensitized, and we don't act. And what Fahma Mohammed, I think it is doing is honestly inspiring for me, because she's a girl my age, and she's managed to get Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, to act as well. And I think they're planning to have an African model of the campaign as well. And I find it awe-inspiring that she's managed to do that. And I think that the reaction that it's created is something we should all strive to create as well for issues such as child marriages and other issues. Yeah.
So I'm very interested in how at WOW we can kind of insist to ourselves that we can make a difference. You know, WOW is not itself, you know, an independent charity with the intention of doing one thing. It is a collecting space for people to realise that to make change you have to be active, and but you have to also know the information. So Shami, just turning to you, if we were today going to go, right, these two princesses locked in their tower, we want to call out to them, we want to make them know they're not alone, we want to get people to hear about their plight. What could we do? Would we go through Amnesty? Would we just write them a letter, hoping it would get there? What would we do?
Oh, that's very exciting. There are all sorts of things that we can do using old media, new media, using the political process. I mean, Mr. Hague needs to be bombarded, does he not, as a result? I mean, in the nicest possible way. So I mustn't use this militaristic language because people get the wrong idea. Mr. Hague should know the strength of feeling from women in the United Kingdom. I mean, Natascha was so eloquent but so diplomatic when she said, well, we don't make a fuss because of cultural relativism. Oil may have something to do with it as well. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. So, and this has, let's face it, this has been an issue in that part of the world at times. You know, these countries are dictatorships, but they're our allies in the war on terror, remember that? And yet, so much terrorism, to use that word, is actually being bred, unsurprisingly, in these most repressive regimes on earth. So I think we could start by letting our Foreign Office know how strongly we as women of the world and as women feel about the plight of our sisters in Saudi. And we can also do that by bombarding the media. The Sunday Times can have follow-up to this. And we should tweet and we should blog and we should use every vehicle at our disposal, local, national and international.
Jude, I'd love to just quote something that's on this topic from Jasvinda Sangera, who was the founder of Karma Nirvana. She just says, talking about these families, but in this country, that operate under the honour system and are self-policing, she says, you can be significantly harmed or whipped off to Pakistan to marry somebody. They deal with the victims as they want, and the world doesn't see it. We've come a long way when it comes to forced marriage. We have a forced marriage unit, and soon it will be a criminal offence. But where there's forced marriage, there's always honour-based abuse. I'd like the government to give us a definition of what it is, and I'd like to see every police force in the UK be inspected in how they deal with it and get trained. I just thought that was a great practical solution.
Okay. Doreen.
I suppose I wanted to say something that women over in Saudi Arabia has won is so that they can wear their headscarf playing football. Something is, because they've been banned from, and so that's been on the radio news this morning. So that is a one-up for women who have managed to struggle and got to that position. And I think sometimes within this country, things that happens here, our government, they're quick to criticise other countries, but not actually do something themselves here, like female mutilation, all the other stuff that's been. They need to do something here at home as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's your point, isn't it? That if you let a small thing happen here, then it's actually permission for it to happen on a much larger scale in other parts of the world. You've given permission, really. Never mind the big things that are happening here, which we'll come to. So, Shami, you've got the next story, which is from the Telegraph, and actually it relates to a session you held yesterday around violation of justice. Would you like to just take us through that story? Which paper is it in? Is it in the Independent?
This is page 13 of the Sunday Telegraph.
Right.
And I think somebody said that I was influential over the Sunday, well, I'm certainly not influential over the Sunday Telegraph, because what's really, this is a heartbreaking story of injustice towards women, but it's also a really interesting case study in how the press reports some of these issues. Yesterday, in a very powerful Liberty session, we heard from lawyers, but importantly, we heard from the families of women who'd been thoroughly let down by, in one case, the military, and in another case, the police. But this story of Anne-Marie Element involves the military. This young woman chose to join the Royal Military Police. She came from a family that had a military tradition and a service tradition, and she was raped. And she had the audacity and the trust to complain about that rape. And guess what? When you get raped in the Royal Military Police by your comrades, who investigates? Your same comrades in the Royal Military Police. And so the investigation was very cursorily shut down, and she was bullied for having made the complaint. And it got to such proportions that she ended up taking her own life. And that would have been that, but for the Human Rights Act, which creates positive obligations on the authorities to protect our lives and to investigate, to properly investigate when there's been an untimely death of that kind. And my colleague in the second row, Emma Norton, would you stand up for a moment, please, Emma? Please, go on, please, I have to do this. I want you to meet my wonderful colleague, everyone, Emma Norton, the solicitor, who... She's a wonderful friend and a wonderful feminist and a wonderful lawyer, human rights lawyer. They have to be clever lawyers, but they also have to be really kind people and able to look after their clients in moments of despair. She was able to get a new inquest into this terrible scandal and cover-up in the Royal Military Police. And now there's going to be a proper criminal investigation into the original rape. And the Telegraph have very nicely written it all up with pictures of Anne-Marie in her uniform and so on. But what they haven't done at any point is to mention the Human Rights Act, because, of course, this newspaper is campaigning to have that very Human Rights Act repealed.
Doreen, how does it feel when something which is, you look to justice in your own country and you think, well, it'll be available, and then A, it's not, and then B, it takes years, and then C, it's not what you thought it was? What's the impact? I know it's a kind of stupid question, really, because you can probably imagine, but did you expect human justice to be there naturally when Stephen was killed?
Well, yes, because I think over the years, when you're young, growing up, the police is there to protect you, they're there to stand up for the law and everything. And then when something devastating like this happened to us, you look to them because you think they're the ones who's going to track down the killers, they're the ones going to make sure these men, boys are brought to justice. And then you realize that no, and it comes down to the color of your skin as to who gets justice and who don't get justice. And for our families, that we are ones who don't get justice. But then we are made to feel, as with the undercover policing, is that we had no right to challenge them. We had no right to question their authority. And why shouldn't we? After all, we pay their salaries. So why shouldn't we challenge them? And that was all I tried to do. And in fact, I wanted to help them. I provided as much information as I could. Whoever gave me information, they're the first people I'd go to with the information. So I wasn't trying to undermine them in any way, but trying to support them. But they made us out to believe, they say we were the cause and we were the one who were being destructive.
Now the thing that's, I suppose, the thread running through all the stories so far is really this is about power. I suppose it's always about power. I mean, the power to be able to lock up your daughters, whether you're a prince or, somebody just living you know, in a caravan, the ability to prevent investigation of your own team, of your own gang, if you like. That's really what's running through all of these stories, isn't it? And you know, part of the reason for doing the panel this morning is just to say that so often when we're doing the papers on Andrew Marr, I mean, I do the papers on Andrew Marr, Shami does the papers on Andrew Marr, Doreen does, you will, you probably have, you know, you do the papers, and I can tell you from my own experience that you raise one woman's issue. There's no such thing as a woman's issue, there's issues. But you raise one issue and people go, we've done enough on women. And we just sort of said, well, if 5 women were doing the papers, what would they choose? And it's very easy to find that this continuous thread of injustice with relationship to power is what we're talking about. Who knows, if the world were run by women, I'm sure there would be 5 men sitting here actually calling out injustice. Because power, when it's rested in any one group of people, is corrupting, we know that. But I think that Shami's point about the inability to use any other ingredient, to insist on judicial justice, you're saying at the moment that the Human Rights Act gives us that, and we're in danger of losing it. I think you should just explain, I mean, some of you will know a lot about that, but could you just explain that issue?
Bottom line, we had no modern Bill of Rights that you could enforce in this country until the Human Rights Act was brought into force in 2000. We had the European Convention on Human Rights, but it would take you 6 years to trot off to an international court in Strasbourg, by which time it's often too late, because you've been put on the plane back to the place of torture or abuse, or something else pretty awful has happened to you. It was one of the more positive legacies of the last Labour government, and it is current Conservative policy to scrap it. And they're also talking about pulling out of the European Convention on Human Rights as well. At the same time, legal aid, which is the practical way in which you get advice and representation, has all but been abolished in this country. In family cases, in welfare cases, in housing cases, in employment cases, it's very, very hard to get access to advice and representation. And now they're talking about potentially tearing up the law that we need to empower us as well. And I just don't think we should let that happen.
Okay, thank you. Now, one of the things that people love about WOW is the fact that although we are very serious, we also like having fun. And I just wanted to, I'm going to read you some recipes, right? Because I was just thinking, because I'm going away for a break shortly, and I'm going to do some cooking. And I was thinking, I really love cooking, but it's actually, I don't get much time, as you can probably imagine. But it's nice when you do. It's so creative, cooking, isn't it? Who likes cooking? Who hates cooking? Okay, half and half. Okay. Well, the human right to cook is what I'm going to discuss. No, there's all of these recipes, right, in the You magazine. And if I just read out the recipe titles, you'll understand why I think this is marvelous. Okay, so you've got fish cakes with Thai salad. Then you've got roast pork loin with broccoli and cauliflower cheese. You've got prawn laksa. You've got pie lentils, orange salad. You've got baked falafel. You've got shoots and leaves red curry. You've got coq au vin. You've got, well, obviously sirloin steak. That's very straightforward. Mexican black bean chili. Moroccan spiced lamb. Skinny spag bowl. That's Italian. Express kedgeree, I think that's colonial. Butter squash soup with saffron yogurt, fattoush salad, chicken masala, paprika goulash, that's Hungarian, Asian sesame salad, and then we've got sea bass. Well, what strikes me about all of that? What strikes you about all of that?
Pardon?
Yeah, go on. As I'm reading them out, what do you think?
It was random. I wasn't expecting recipes to come up halfway through the session. I need to try one of them.
You need to try them. You definitely need to try them. That's definitely what you need to do. Well, look, what struck me was the fact that these are recipes from right across the world. Not right across the world, okay? It's not fully comprehensive, but it's really interesting. I'm sure if you read that paper, say 20 years ago, you know, they would have all been pretty much sort of British food. But the range of recipes from all across the world is really exciting. I mean, and that's just something when people talk about, you know, where Britain is heading. You think, well, it's heading for a fantastic cookbook for a start.
But this is why I love Jude Kelly, because she's such a little ray of sunshine, isn't she? Because when she says that, I kind of think at the same time we're listening to all this horrible nationalistic, racist rhetoric that comes out of sometimes the same newspapers that do the recipes, and sometimes, you know, from politicians and so on. And Jude's kind of got a point that they're the ones who are fighting against the tide of history, not us. Because this is a shrinking, interconnected world, and we are women of the world, and we do feel solidarity with our sisters in Saudi Arabia, and we do want to eat prawn laksa. Exactly. And that's why some of these people are so grumpy. And we should just remember that history's on our side.
I would like to add, Jude, that we do need to get our Middle Eastern men into the kitchen as well. And it shouldn't just be an area that women are meant to thrive in.
I agree with you. And look, here's cheery, right? And I mean this seriously, right? Year one of WOW, I made a joke. I sometimes make bad jokes, and I do regret it when I do. I really do. But I made a joke, I don't know, I said something like about my age. And a woman who's older than me said, you know, it's not fair to make jokes about getting older. You know, it's great fun to get older. And I agreed with her, and I apologise. Okay, so here's a big picture on the back of this thing. It's Joan Brown, 81, cancer survivor, looking really attractive. 1 in 3 women who get breast cancer are over 70, so don't assume you're past it. And I mean, that's a good piece of advertising, isn't it? A, because she looks great, because she's 81, why wouldn't she? B, because, you know, don't assume you're past it kind of has an implication of sex, and I always think that's good. And you know, and B, because 20 years ago, we couldn't talk about breast cancer. And there it is. You know, a lot of things in that advert prove that people can campaign for change of imagery, change of language, change of attitude, and it can get there. So, optimism. Right, let's go back to pessimism. No. Okay, Sadiqa, can I turn to you now? I think you're going to take us through, well, actually something that could really be very positive about childcare, issues to do with childcare, something that runs through everything that we talk about here at WOW.
Yeah. My story today from the Sunday papers is about a need for free childcare. I read recently in the BBC News that something shocking, that we are paying more for childcare than we are mortgages. It's come to the point where we're paying maybe 7,200 on average for childcare, whereas mortgages are still at around the 7,000 mark. And I find that shocking as a young woman, and who wants to feel reassured that in the future I could have a work-life balanced living. And I read that and I was shocked. But today I found some hope, perhaps, that we are calling for free childcare for 1-year-olds in the country, and it's something that they want to see happening and want to see in the manifestos that we see coming up soon. The Scottish government has said that if they are independent, that they will have free childcare for 1-year-olds, which I think is great. At the moment, we only have 15 free hours of childcare per week, but there isn't. Other than that, there isn't anything available. And I think it's just not enough. It's a huge barrier to women who want to work and want to have children, and, you know, want to have children so that they can see them, but then also want careers. I have here that Miss Willett, she has 2 sons, and she has them at the House of Commons nursery. There's even toys around, and I think that should become more of a norm, to have to be accepted that, you know, women can have children, and that they should be a part of their lives, and perhaps even have them in their workplace. I think that's great. And yeah, sorry.
Okay,
yeah.
Now not everybody here will have children, not everybody will have wanted children, but I think that we can collectively agree that that children's the inability for women to have flexibility and choice because of unaffordable childcare prevents women having freedom in all kinds of ways. And Natascha, you've got 3 boys,
I've got 3 sons. But Jude, I want to be controversial for a second. I don't think this is a women's issue. It's a people's issue. That men should have facilities in their workplaces. As long as it's the jurisdiction of women to take care of this and have responsibility, nothing's going to change. And my trite comment about getting guys into the kitchen, I mean, I know we've got all the Jamie Olivers and Gordon Ramsay, but again, that's a rather patriarchal kitchen, as I understand it. In domestically unexciting cooking for kids, boys should be learning as much from their fathers as they are from their mothers, and it's not happening. And it's these, to me, it's these tiny incremental changes that will have a macro huge effect on how we look at things. I mean, my boys get mocked for cooking. They're mocked at school for being interested in cooking a curry with me or something, learning, you know, a way of, and my oldest son will say, but it's like science. I mean, it's just, it's putting ingredients together and seeing what happens and seeing what, these kind of, these labels that we have, these gender-specific labels that we still have, whether it's DIY or whether it's cooking, it drives me crazy. And whether it's dressing up in, you know, pink tutus or Bob the Builder outfits, there's just, it's so restrictive, and I think that it bleeds into later on in the workplace, and just as you've just said, this idea that there should be childcare facilities in the place of work for women, but we never talk about it for men, because it's just not men's problem. They don't have to take responsibility, and as long as they don't have to, they won't. And I think in this instance we should look at countries where there is a template for this, and a successful one, Norway, Iceland, you know, other countries in Scandinavia, where men have paternity leave, as we all know, and women do too, and they have an equal amount of it. And it's regarded as much of a men's issue as it is a women's issue. And this is something that I'd love to see change.
Shami. The idea of free childcare, it's coming from the Lib Dems, I think, is that correct? What do you think that could mean in terms of the time it could travel from an idea that it should exist to it actually eventually happening? You know, just in terms of your experience.
It's really very simple. It's all to do with political commitment.
Go on.
So for example, I used to be a lawyer in government. I worked in a place called, that you may have heard of, called the Home Office, otherwise known as Mordor. Abandon all hope, ye who enter there. But I got out. On early release, I got out and I came to liberty, hurrah! But I witnessed how easy it is for politicians to legislate and even to provide for things economically if they want to. If they think it's a vote winner, they will do it, and they will do it. They will write the legislation on the back of an envelope. I know, because I used to write on the back of the envelopes for them, or carry the envelopes, right? So it's all to do with political will. They can do so much so quickly if they really want to, if they think there are votes in them, their hills. And again, this is something that louder voices from and Natascha's right, from women and men, about free or affordable childcare could make such a difference. I think it was one of the tragedies of the last government that did actually spend quite a lot of money on various educational things. I think it would have made such a difference if they'd prioritised free and affordable childcare, and I think it would make a massive difference.
Doreen?
Talking about being in the House of Commons, well, recently one of the baronesses in the House of Lords has been bringing her baby in the pushchair, so it seems as if people begin to be more open and accepting that you can bring your child into the place of work. And mind you, there are times that she feels, you can see that she feels really guilty, because if the child starts crying, she feels she has to leave the room. So I think we need to get to the point where, you know, at the end of the day, if we don't have children, you know, how do we move on as society? Because, you know, you need to have children. So you need to have the facilities there that supports women and fathers for bringing up children. But as I say, you know, see it happening in the House of Lords, you know, is a step forward.
I think that Sadiqa's dilemma, though, ties exactly up with Natascha, which is that you're sitting on a platform at 17 worrying about work-life balance. And, you know, you're still, as a mother and a working artist worrying about work-life balance, and so is Shami, and in some respects so are you. And I know that if I had a 17-year-old boy here, he's much less likely to be thinking, gosh, how am I going to do this? But you know, we want him to, this fictionary 17-year-old boy, we want him to think that it is his responsibility, but we also want to help him solve it. So I think this idea of free childcare, universal free childcare, it sounds so simple. And you know, I haven't got the economic figures to hand as to whether if that was a trigger for releasing more people to work in the economy, what that would do. But I'm certainly going to go and do some homework on that. But I'm interested in just thinking, well, you know, if we talk about political will, if there was a march, well, a huge march on free childcare again, men and women together, if there was massive petitions going in all the time on free childcare, in your experience, would that have an effect? I mean, is it something we grumble about but don't do anything about? Is my question.
I'm becoming more and more, maybe it's just the wow factor, I don't know, but I am actually becoming more optimistic about the possibilities of change. You know, the big pessimistic example that's sometimes given about protests and about marching is the Iraq War. And some people say, but we all marched and it made no difference, and it made no difference. However, years later, when the House of Commons voted against intervention in Syria, make no mistake, Iraq was haunting them, and the marchers who marched against Iraq were still marching through those politicians' minds. And I do think that MPs are very twitchy, rightly twitchy, in a democracy about their post bags and their email accounts and the phone calls that their offices receive. I have seen change happen. When I was, you know, Sadiqa's age, we still had apartheid in South Africa. The Berlin Wall hadn't fallen yet, and I never thought I would see those changes in my lifetime. And that was, 25 years ago or something. And, you know, sometimes history speeds up. And small things make a massive difference, and people coming together. I have seen this. I have seen ID cards repealed. I've seen us defeat government plans to lock people up for 90 days and 42 days without charge. And I've seen just a small bunch of people connect with society to make that possible. And those are minority issues in a way. Those are about demonised minorities who bear the brunt of that kind of civil liberty abuse. This is a universal need for everyone in the country. It ought to be easy. It's exactly the sort of thing that we should all be campaigning for.
Just to follow up with that, who would have thought, and this is not a sort of human rights issue, but who would have thought 10 years ago that there would not be a bar or a restaurant in England without smoke? How did we institute that? How did we turn that around like that by making it law? Things change very, very fast if there's political will, as you said. I mean, I never dreamed that there wouldn't be bars filled with smoke. No one thought it could happen.
Well, even wearing seatbelts was controversial in cars. Well, again, I'll put it back to this audience, right? Some of you will be feeling really strongly. Some of you will be having a little kind of burning feeling in your stomach, and you think, oh, you know, this is something I really feel strongly about. Well, do it. Do it. Go and join up with other people's campaigns or start one. And I will have to tell you, it would be, I mean, there's a huge row of fantastically intelligent young women sitting down the front here. If you all joined together with Sadiqa and went, right, we do not want to face this choice in 10 years' time. We want it solved now. If you led that campaign, it would be incredibly powerful. So I'm not insisting that's what you should do. I'm just saying, never underestimate, like, you know, like Nimka Ali and Daughters of Eve campaign. They're young people, and they've made a massive difference. So let me move on to the next subject. Doreen, you saw in The Sun Louise Mensch writing from the States, Hillary Clinton might not run. Do you want to just tell us about that?
Yes, it's in The Sun, and in fact it's quite a very small article talking about Hillary Clinton, because you know that she ran, attempted to run for president when Obama was running, but now as a woman she's trying to now look to run for that. But what there's a leak now saying that she probably has a brain tumor, and that she probably won't, and what the effect of that would be on the United States if somebody like her. And so we're not sure if this is really true. But apparently she had an operation before, and it's as if on a tumor, it's as if it's come back. So, which would be quite devastating, considering that she's quite high profile, all the stuff that she did when she was Secretary of State, all the traveling she did, all the things that she did around within the Middle East, and all the work that she's done there, and the fact that this devastating news could be true about her, you know, it's like, you know, where are the women as leaders?
Sadiqa, what's your reaction when you hear about that?
I always think that there should be more women in power, in high-profile positions, and to hear, and I always thought Hillary Clinton was a huge icon of that, and then to hear this story that she can't run because of a returning brain tumor is quite devastating to me as a young woman. I read recently that about how Cameron came to the House of Commons with a front bench full of men, and he was called out upon that, and it was so transparent because the next time he came, it was full of women, and it's so transparent how they were leading an old lads sort of circle, and that because they were called out upon it, they suddenly became pro-women, and it's just really frustrating to see that in the 21st century, women still don't have enough representation in politics. And not only representation, but also power. I mean, we look to the Nordic countries, in which I think the percentage is 42% of women representing in the government, and they do hold a lot of political pull as well. And it's just we need to look at that as a model, and as a model that we need to follow. And it's just really frustrating to find that we're not doing that as a leading country in the world.
Well, I think yes, and the point that you're making, Doreen, is that if it is true, and I want to come back to Shami on this, if it is true that Hillary Clinton may not run, the fact is you can't go, oh well, in that case we'll ask Dorothy Squires, or we'll ask, you know, Judy Smith, because there's nobody else that we can think of in the Democrats or the Republicans where you go, oh well, we'll just move on to them then. But Shami, is there any possibility that this might not be true? You know, it's one of those things where somebody is sort of out for the count because of the newspapers, and as you know, newspapers are less reliable.
Oh, really, Jude? I know you're a ray of sunshine, but now there's a little sarcasm that's kind of, coming in with. Well, of course, it's possible that it might not be true, and actually, the idea of briefing or leaking that a potential presidential candidate might have a brain tumour is potentially pretty insidious. So I think we'll just park that one, and and where is this really coming from? Is it really coming from friends of Hillary? I'm not so sure. So let's just hope against hope that Hillary Clinton is very well indeed, and that these rumours are not true, and not let them gain currency, I think, until we hear something official. Okay, then just in the last 5 minutes, moving on to the final subject, Shami, you've got the CEO of Whistles backs quotas on footsie boards. Absolutely, the CEO of Whistles has come out. This is really interesting when we're talking about change and how it happens and how history speeds up and slows down at different times. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want to just be coming to WOW to debate the concerns of posh professional women like me, and should we be in the Supreme Court and should we be in boards. My priority would be something like the universal childcare or the violence against women, make no mistake. However, I think we need equality at every strata of society if we're going to make real structural change. And I have to tell you, in my adult life, I've changed my mind about quotas. I have changed my mind. I think, 20 years ago, I bought that whole kind of classic liberal argument that, oh no, I don't want to be a token. And do you know what, when people call me a token now, I say, not so much a token as a beacon.
That's brilliant.
And I'm not so naive. If people want to say that I've only been on TV because of the boxes that I tick, well, there are a few blokes still filling a few boxes, and they never worried about whether they got their job as a cabinet minister or a high court judge because of who their dad was, right? So What I think is that it is time for quite radical structural changes to things like companies and possibly political parties and so on, because this is the equivalent of an apartheid, and I don't care who's offended by that. It's literally the greatest injustice in the world, this structural gender injustice. And if you want to have the privilege of running your business affairs as a public limited company endorsed by the state with all the benefits that come with that, you better not discriminate, and you better demonstrate that you're not discriminating with this solid structural change.
Okay, now I just want to read you, thank you. So Jane Shepherdson, who's the CEO of Whistles, she's just revealed plans to open 30 more overseas stores over the next 5 years, financed by a possible stock market flotation. She quotes, she says, once you get to board level in a lot of companies, it's very male dominated. Unless culturally that changes, you're not really going to see that many more women taking those positions, because women don't want to work in that confrontational environment. But it's never really going to happen unless there's a quota. I think quotas would be a good idea. It's something you can do to kickstart the issue. After it's established, you can relax it. Anyway, this is the other quote that I think is so fascinating. Because Lord Davies, the government's boardroom diversity champion, said such a move would be a mistake. But then Mrs. Shepherdson says she has personally encountered sexism in the workplace. The usual stuff, she says, having to put chairs up against my door at events and functions, she said. After a few drinks, many people think they've got a right to, well, you know. I mean, that's
a mistake.
A mistake to say it?
No, a mistake to do it.
Oh, a mistake to put a chair up? What do you mean?
A mistake to have a few drinks at the office Christmas party and think that you have a droit de seigneur.
Yes, yeah, I wouldn't think you survive long in Whistles. But I mean, I just think that is really interesting that she says the usual stuff. Actually having to put a chair up against my door so that I'm not assaulted. I mean, that's the implication of that. And that's what I meant about sort of something where people go, yeah, you know, the usual stuff. That's an amazing quote. So at that point, we have to finish. I was going to give you something really optimistic, you know, because I like to do that. I was going to say, look, the sports pages have completely changed in the last few years. And I was flicking through, you saw me do it. I was thinking, well, there'll be something on women cricket, or there's something on women football, there'll be some women's darts players, but there isn't any. There is one article about Joanna Rosal, the cyclist, and that's it. But you know, that's obviously going to change, because you're going to write now to the Observer and say that's not a satisfactory report on this week's sport, aren't you? You are. So I'm going to thank the panel. Thank you. Sujina, Doreen, Shami and Natascha.